Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. I've got a new camera, so hopefully you find this new setting good. I know a few people have been asking about whether or not I was going to get a better camera, so hopefully this adds a little bit more to my reviews. So this is going to be my first review under the new setting. So the film I'm going to be reviewing tonight is a comedy from Sweden. Now this is spoken in the Swedish, English and Norwegian language. English subtitles, of course. Released in the year 2008, directed by Fredrik Boklund, and this film is called Morgan Pålsson, World Reporter. So the story to this film, it takes place in the news reporting world, as the title would make you believe, and Morgan Pålsson is the best known Swedish reporter. Now this guy is a bumbling halfwit. How he has a job is beyond me. It's one of those sorts of films, very much like Anchorman, where in the real life this sort of thing would never have happened. Morgan Pålsson would have been fired on the spot because it seems like trouble is always following him. So at the start of the movie he's in Lithuania, he's covering something that the Lithuanian Prime Minister is is doing, and one thing leads to another, and there is hilarious consequences. So that really sets the tone for what Morgan Pålsson is about. And then so he gets a new task of going to this made-up country in Africa to cover the elections. Now he's the only Western reporter there, so already there's a lot of importance put on him being in Africa because he's the Western world's source. But things are going to get a lot more fierce when a Norwegian crackshot reporter comes to the country as well to cover what is going on. So Morgan Pålsson doesn't like this, and all of a sudden it's Sweden versus Norway as a battle of wits occur in order to get that big story. But things are further complicated when this country is under siege by a military coup. Now Morgan Pålsson has a lot to juggle with, whether or not he can get to that story and win the win at the end of the day for Sweden. That's something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Morgan Pålsson, World Reporter. Now this movie was an interesting film. Now when it comes to Scandinavian humour, I am really a very big fan of it. I love the deadpan humour. I think Scandinavians do it best, and that's why it's not going to appeal to everybody. So coming into Morgan Pålsson, World Reporter, I was expecting something similar to that, but I was very surprised to see that this has a very Americanized sort of humour, and it actually feels like a Scandinavian version of Anchorman. Unfortunately it's nowhere near as good as Anchorman, for reasons that I'm about to go into, but I will say that the movie doesn't come without positives. I thought the positives of the film, it does depict the rivalry, the friendly rivalry between Sweden and Norway. In Scandinavia, the countries in between, they all have a rivalry, and a lot of films depict that rivalry, and this film is no different. It has Sweden versus Norway. I thought it was a really good way. The Swedish are making fun of the Norwegians. There's some jokes in there that work very well, and it just feels like it's very much the same as Australia and New Zealand and USA and Canada. That friendly rivalry, because we're so close. And if you're an American or a Canadian or a New Zealand or Australian, you understand that rivalry, and that's the rivalry that Sweden and Norway have, and Denmark. So in this film you got Sweden belittling Norway and Norway belittling Sweden. I thought that was really fun, and it was a worthy inclusion. Now the slapstick comedy does work at the start of the film. I thought it had a very strong opening. When the Lithuanian president is put in, there's a joke about his name which I thought was really good. It might be offensive, but it would be offensive to people taking this film too seriously, and because of its exaggerated nature you can't take this film seriously, and unfortunately the exaggerated nature of this film is its ultimate undoing. Now this apparently is a sketch, is a movie based on a sketch in Sweden, so Swedish people will know who Morgan Pålsson is, and for me he was just a very irritating guy, and that's ultimately what prevented me from enjoying the film. Now when I make the comparison with this and Anchorman, the similarities between the two films is the fact that it does take place in a different dimension. Now these characters are getting away with things that you would never get away with in the real world. So you've got to make allowances for that. You've got to leave your brain at the door, get the popcorn and just lay back and not think about what's happening and just laugh about what's being put in front of you. Now Anchorman did that so well because it was exaggerated, but the characters were so funny. It was well written, the characters were well drawn out, and although you don't relate to them, you like them because, for example, Steve Carell's character character Brick. He was really funny because he's really dumb, and it just had a natural sort of charm to it. Whereas in Morgan Pålsson, it becomes irritating as opposed to charming and as opposed to funny. Now at the start of the movie, yes, it is, but it is funny. But the more you get to know Morgan Pålsson, the more irritating he does become, which leads me to believe that this movie definitely should have been a TV show. It should have stayed within the sketch sort of world in the television industry. Whereas in this film, it feels like it is a sketch. It's a half-an-hour sketch that has been dragged out to make a feature film. So they've only got a certain amount of material there, and it does get very tiresome and repetitive after a while, and you think to yourself, I'm not enjoying this as much as I should. I enjoyed Anchorman from the first minute to the last, well for me anyway, but this movie just runs out of steam, and by the end of it, as I said, you're not enjoying it, you're becoming very irritated, and you're looking at your watch. Now it would have been a lot better if this was a much more serious sort of satire on the way that world reporters will, you know, tinker with the news in order to make the big story look good for themselves. But they didn't go down that path. As I said, they go down more of an Anchorman path where it's just basically out of the realms of possibility. Therefore, it relies on very, you know, slapstick humour. It's kind of the humour that Scandinavia is not known for. As I said, the deadpan comedy is much better. So this movie would have fitted a lot better if it was satirical, if it was much more of a serious satire that had a very deadpan quality to it. But I can understand, because it was a sketch, it needs to be exaggerated. And there are people that are going to like this film, and each to their own. But for me, I just thought it would have worked a lot better if Morgan Pålsson was a likeable character, not just an irritating twat. It actually felt like the guy at the party who thinks he's really funny, but he's making a complete fool of himself, and you're thinking to yourself, just shut up, mate, alright? You've made a fool of yourself, go home. Whereas opposed to Anchorman, Anchorman is like the really funny guy at the party. You want to be around. You want to give him some more drinks so he just gets funnier. And that's what Anchorman does very well. Now I know some people might not like Anchorman and might disagree with me completely. Feel free to leave a comment, but for me, Anchorman does what it does very well, and Morgan Pålsson, the world reporter, it doesn't have the charm, and it doesn't work as well as it probably should have, and as well as it probably thinks it does. So I thought the acting was decent. I like the fact that Morgan Pålsson's cameraman is the other character. I thought he was a straight man, and Morgan Pålsson was the crazy man. So Morgan Pålsson was symbolising the free-spirited kind, you know, the crazy kind, and all the humour, whereas the reporter was basically representing reality, representing the real sort of person. So in these sorts of movies, I think it does bounce well off each other very well, and at the start of the movie it does work well, and that's where Anchorman comes down a little bit. There isn't so much of a straight man quality, although Christina Applegate's character, I guess you could say she was more of a straight man, or straight woman in this case, the straight character where all the comedy bounces off. And but I thought that this was more obvious in this film because this character was, you know, basically stone cold straight. So I actually liked that. I thought the chemistry between the two at the start was good, but then you lose all of that likeable quality as the movie goes along, and it just meanders. You're looking at your watch, waiting for it to finish, because you just can't stand Morgan Pålsson anymore. So that ultimately is what hurt the film considerably. I will say that, as I said, it's not a complete disaster. A few people might like this film. If you like Anchorman, I would still say check it out, because it does have, you know, reason to watch it, but for me, I was let down because it does go down a different avenue as far as Scandinavian humour is concerned, and it just missed the mark for me. So overall, for Morgan Pålsson, World Reporter, I'm going to give it 2 stars, and unfortunately it's not going to come recommended. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.